Hey everyone, in this video I wanted to talk about my experience, or rather it's more appropriate to say my lack of experience, with sex, dating, and women in general. I have covered this topic in an earlier video, but that one is pretty surface level and not that serious, so I'm going to try to be a bit more introspective in this one. As I was thinking over the title for the video, it was originally going to be something along the lines of being a 22-year-old virgin is a humiliation ritual, or that it's brutal, or whatever the latest black pill buzzword is. But I've already done my fair share of negative rambling on this channel, and for this topic, it wouldn't even be that sincere, because I've come to the realization that I don't really care as much as I thought I did about things like losing my virginity or getting a girlfriend, and that much of my desire has been spurred on by external societal pressures. This isn't some great epiphany. I've been on the internet long enough that plenty of people have shared similar sentiments, regardless of their age or gender. Though in the past I wasn't as receptive to this idea because I was still clinging on to the hope that the right person would come into my life. Though now I think I've reached a unique point where for the first time in my life I'm not in an environment that is conducive to socializing and therefore getting into a relationship. I spent the last 4 years in college where I'd be around people that are roughly the same age, have the same goals, interests, ideals, etc. Basically all the stuff that would make getting some friends achievable. I know it's rather cliche, but I really did take that environment for granted, and I pretty much missed or ignored all my opportunities to practice social skills and form relationships. Additionally, though I felt I was following a standard trajectory for my life, I understood that I wasn't on the same level as my peers when it came to navigating conversations and coming across as likable to be around. I say all this stuff because, at least from my perspective, to get into a relationship, you have to be competent enough to make individual friends or get into a friend group first. That way, you're increasing your potential to find someone naturally, and you're also going to be improving your social skills, allowing you to be better prepared if you happen to meet the right person. I'm not saying that the only way to meet someone has to be in person and organically, but it is likely the best option considering how formulaic and challenging the online dating market has become. But beyond the actual environment of college being my best shot for getting a girlfriend, there's also my age. Not saying I'm my grandpa or anything, though I know teenagers on the internet, especially on short form social media platforms, love to completely destroy the parameters around what being old is. I will say I'm pretty immature for my age, both emotionally and socially, as I've guarded myself against any kind of mental adversity that wasn't absolutely required. Additionally, the way I present myself hasn't changed much since I was a teenager. I haven't experimented or looked into fashion, I just wear whatever I think is comfortable. I'm not in the best shape aesthetically or functionally because I didn't exercise except for walking almost the entire time I was in college, and I do the bare minimum to keep my personal hygiene in check. Yeah, I know I'm really selling myself here, but I think the point I'm trying to make is that my past decisions have finally caught up with me, where now I'm a young adult that can't find an environment or circumstance that would allow me to naturally get a girlfriend. Though even if that were to happen, I don't have the social aptitude and haven't improved my physical appearance enough to actually make anything out of those situations. So with my current situation giving me an abundance of free time to ruminate to my heart's content, I've concluded that there isn't much I can do when it comes to making progress in my dating life. I'm not trying to sound too defeatist, but I like to think I'm being objective about this. Also, it doesn't help that I have no direction or purpose, so I can't really use the excuse that I normally would use, where I would just say, well, I don't have time for dating because I'm focusing on other more important areas in my life. But in times like these, it's best to go with old reliable, which for me is just if the issue doesn't show an immediate negative impact, then I'm going to pretend like it doesn't exist. Okay, I do say that half jokingly because I am trying to accept my situation here, but at the same time, I'm not doing anything about it. Because realistically, what are my options? I live in a suburb where the majority of the residents are a bunch of old parents and their young children, and as for the wider community, I live in a fairly developed city, but I just can't really relate to any of the people my age. It's not like I have an extreme sense of pride toward my niche interests. I am willing to partake in small talk or ordinary social situations, but my problem is that my social incompetency has always been apparent enough to the people around me to the point where it ruins any opportunity of leaving a good impression. I'm not trying to sound hyperbolic. I'm not saying every time I participate in conversation, everyone involved ends up hating me, but for the few times I try to put myself out there and socialize, in the best case scenario, the impression I leave on people was roughly, oh, that guy isn't so bad. He seemed pretty shy, but at least he didn't say anything incredibly moronic or offensive. I realize that's not the best way to go about viewing outcomes of social interactions, because not every experience is going to be positive, and you can only do so much to influence what people think of you, as a good amount of it is going to be developed subconsciously regardless of what you say or do. So, since I don't excel at in person conversations, and I spend 90% of the day in my room, a reasonable choice would be to consider using dating apps. Though I don't feel too comfortable talking about this topic in great detail, I will give my impressions and explain why I don't think I would benefit too much from them. So, as for why dating apps wouldn't work out too well for me, to start, I have pretty strong feelings of apprehension and worry when it comes to putting myself out on the internet. That's going to sound quite ironic considering the stuff I talk about on this channel, but I'm able to be a lot more selective about what I want to showcase or discuss. Also, with the nature of online dating, your appearance is going to be far more of a significant factor in terms of initial compatibility because of the fast paced and gamified nature of these platforms. I don't really want to give myself a rating on physical appearance, mainly because my internal bias would likely not make my score that accurate. But in terms of what I said earlier, I would say that I'm an average to below average person in terms of looks. I mean, even if I were to get past the initial vetting process and find someone who can tolerate looking at me, I'd then be subjected to even more evaluations and judgments through messaging. And I do think it is much easier to leave a lasting positive impression in person compared to messaging someone, because if you are actually compatible, it's going to be apparent a lot quicker. A lot of what I said is pretty obvious, and if you've watched any videos or had experience with dating apps, this shouldn't be news. I'm just stating the aspects that deter someone like me from online dating. And I'm sure that dating apps aren't the only way I can get a girlfriend, but I don't feel like doing a bunch of research into alternative solutions because the whole premise of this video is supposed to be why I don't care anymore. I'm not sure how to move on to the next subtopic, but I wanted to do some more reflection. I remember one conversation in college where I was making some small talk with one of my only friends, and the topic of relationships was brought up. I think he was venting about how his previous girlfriend had broken up with him. He then turned the conversation towards me, asking if I was in a relationship or have ever had one. And I responded with a surface level anecdote about how I used to date someone in high school, but we broke up after I left college. I knew I couldn't lie about currently having a girlfriend or even seeing someone in the past few years, because I went to a relatively small school, so I'm sure that would have raised some questions. Fortunately for me, the topic of virginity never came into conversation with this person, or anyone else for that matter. Not just because I never had what I consider to be a close friend or friend group during college, but that sex is still a relatively taboo topic in the US. So you might think that with everything I said in this video, that if I were in a similar situation and asked about my experience with relationships or sex, I'd be more honest. But even though I've accepted my situation internally, there still is shame and embarrassment around being a virgin and never having a girlfriend, especially as a young man, and that negative reputation only grows the older you get. I don't feel too morally conflicted about lying when it comes to stuff like this, if it means I can save face and do my best to just change the topic. Though being so open on the internet is counterintuitive, I will say that given how small my channel is, those two parts of my life are still pretty separate. Another thing that's brought me some closure on never being in a relationship is that it's futile to fantasize and make assumptions about having a girlfriend when I don't have anything to compare or reference that to. It's like the old saying of, you don't know what you don't know, and I think that applies to both my expectations for a relationship and my ability to actually get into one. Some might say that I've given up too early, but for now I've accepted my loneliness and I'm trying not to put too much importance on something I've never experienced because that will likely lead to greater disappointment. I wouldn't say that I'm MGTOW because I disagree with a lot of what that community has to say about both men and women. And I haven't completely given up on relationships, I'm just not actively pursuing them, and I'm just tired of making up excuses as to why I haven't. I guess this video was a way for me to confront the constant procrastination and ignoral of any attempts to better myself, but I think I just reaffirmed all my previous beliefs and I'm just more open about them now. At the end of the day, you're never going to feel 100% ready to pursue a relationship, but there is a significant advantage to starting in your adolescence. Okay, that might wrap it up for this video. I apologize for the delay in uploading this. I had some family over for Christmas and I get paranoid about recording when there's people around, so I just took a couple days as a break from videos. I mean, I don't want to adhere to a strict schedule, as it's much better that topics aren't forced and come naturally, but I'm starting to ramble too much off topic. So I think that will be the end. Bye now.